Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Indie Game Movement, the podcast that talks about the marketing and business of indie games. I'm Andrew Pappas. I'm going to be your host today, and we're going to be talking about, it's not the event, it's you. So, my GDC recap. Well, it's a quarter zip pullover, a virus, and a reminder that it's not the event that changes things. It's you. So, specifically in this episode, I'm going to reflect how our intentions actually shape our relationships and why deep connections beat shallow networking and why the biggest impact you'll get from any event that moves the needle depends entirely on you. So, that's what we're going to be talking about right here today on Indie Game Movement. Hey, everybody, and we're back. And today, it's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a bit off the cuff because what I figured I'd do today is just kind of unpack my thoughts a little bit from GDC. As some of you probably may have known, I attended GDC. I was actually speaking this year, which went, I thought, really well. Great experience. If anybody is actually remotely interested in speaking at GDC, I encourage you to do so, and even reach out to me. I'll give you tips or what I found has worked well for me and what hasn't. So, but otherwise, it was a great talk. It's called Serving Your Players' Needs, a new look at what players want. That's not really why we're here, by the way. We're not going to go recap on my talk, but I figured I'd share that with you. It should be in the vault. It was recorded. And I'm going to try to make sure that they make it public. And if not, I'll re-record it and let you guys know when that goes out so you can check out the talk. So, yeah, there's that. But yeah, I really today just wanted to unpack my thoughts, like so many other people do out there, about GDC, their takeaways and everything else. And, well, my quick recap is just this. My hotel caught on fire. No one was hurt or anything. It was a quick fire. Thank you to the San Francisco Fire Department, probably neighboring ones, because they got us back in the hotel pretty quickly. Happened at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. It was great. I got a quarter zip pullover because I'm a sucker for those things. I wasn't going to buy any merch. I did because, like I said, I'm a sucker for quarter zips. A cold, which I still have remnants of, as you can probably hear in my voice. And obviously my talk, went well, as I shared with you a moment ago. And, but in light of all that, like, I know I'm leading in with saying these are my takeaways from GDC. So you're like, wait, what? That sounds very uneventful. But, in part because I started to make this realization in terms of what are the takeaways from an event like GDC and such. And my takeaway was this. It was irrelevant. GDC was irrelevant. Okay, now, I really don't mean this in a negative way, so just bear with me and hear me out, because it's all going to make sense in a minute. During the event, as you may have expected or may be familiar with when you're attending different events like this, as you're going around, people are going to be like, hey, how's your event? And, just basic questions as part of networking, all that stuff. And, the one that kept coming up, which expectedly so, was, how's your GDC going? And, I didn't really have a clear answer or anything. I didn't have much time to think about it, to be honest. It was busy and everything. So at one time I think it was probably midweek, I did really kind of sit down to think about it. And the only thing that like popped up in my head was really, it's kind of cool that over the past 3 years that I've been attending this event, I've grown to know a lot of other people, like way more than I would expected. And there's a lot of reasons for it. It's like the type of work I do, having this podcast and all the guests and all those things, right? And the more I thought about it, I was like, okay, well, who cares? Like, you know more people, great. but well, what else? That's a question I always like to ask myself and others, actually, by the way, is what else? It's a really good one. I'm not going to get into it now, but think about it. It's a good question to ask yourself and others. What else? So that's what I was doing. I was asking myself, what else? And then, I kept thinking, more about the people I know and met. And then I started thinking about, the connections I made, in particular at this event, like reconnecting with people and new ones too. And then I thought about the relationships that I formed and what those were like and what those meant and everything. And then it's really started to get me thinking. Now, and then it kind of just lingered there, right? Because again, mid-event, lots going on. So then post-event, I started seeing a lot more chatter on LinkedIn in particular. And I'm sure there was other places too where people are giving their takes of the event. And, some were positive, some were negative. I'd say most are neutral and stereotypical, what you'd expect. Oh, I got to meet with old friends and new. And, same kind of stuff you really see every year, people giving their reflection on. Sometimes it might be a take on the industry, where it is, where it needs to go, these, people's opinions on that and everything else. And some of those things were kind of interesting to read and interesting takes, but none of them really landed for me because I kept going back to what I was thinking about with these people and the relationships. And that's when I started to realize that was really my key takeaway or the main thing. And that was the relationships I have established or was starting to grow. The ones I built over time. And not only that, but also what was the actual intent behind those? And even the intent with the new ones. So I really started to think about this more and more because I'm like, wait, there's something here. I know it seems so simple and basic, but there is something there. And I wanted to get down more to the bottom of it, really. And what I started to realize is, it was those relationships that gave the event meaning, at least for me. And there's something I think really powerful there too. And then I started to kind of expand a little bit beyond that. Okay, great. We're still kind of focused on the event, but what else? And then I started to think like, okay, well, some of the people, that I met there in this particular one, where do these relationships start? Well, a lot of them weren't made at GDC. I mean, there's a few, like, for example, there's one person I met last year as a biz dev meeting. I asked to meet with them. They met with me. Good meeting. And then, at the very end of the meeting, I before I had it with them, actually, I checked out their LinkedIn profile and saw they were, oh my goodness, I got to remember this because he's going to kill me if I don't. he was not a Kaido, jiu-jitsu instructor, black belt level, I believe. He's not anymore. But I asked him like, hey, do you still do that? And when I did, he lit right up. And because of that one question, like we ended up touching base with each other regularly. We haven't worked it with each other yet, which is fine because we actually became really good friends. And there's a lot of really interesting, cool things that happened that we found out, like, we both have kids. Oh, he's from Canada, but he travels regularly right next to my hometown where I live. Like all this stuff, So anyways, my point, I'm digressing a bit, but like, that's a quick example of, some friendships, of course, but like, relationships are made at the event, but in particular, a lot of them weren't. They were outside of GDC. They were in various other capacities, whether it was business development, people connecting me with other people, with whatever the case may be, all over the place. But again, the point here is the event really just, deepened these relationships, right? That's what gave the event meaning, is these relationships. Excuse me. So another thing too is like, I think a lot of it, we look at an event like GDC or others as an opportunity to, connect with people. And, it definitely does create that opportunity, but it doesn't like magically happen either. I mean, in some cases it can. You could be randomly going and you bump into someone, next thing you know, boom, it happens. So I can't say it can't magically do it all the, because it does sometimes. It does work that way. And so the more I started thinking about it too, is, you know, it's not, but again, like those things can happen. But I think a better way to look at it is, it's not the event that's doing it. It's you. It's me. It's how you go about, presenting yourself and everything else. And for some of us that's way harder than others, especially if you're introverted. I'm definitely not introverted, but there are moments when I can be, but I'm primarily not. But still, it all comes down to you. It's funny, actually, just a couple days ago, I had breakfast with a friend, and his daughter is a costume designer still in college, and she's, getting out. And he was telling me how she networks and everything, and the connections she's starting to make is pretty cool. And I was like, wow, she's really getting herself out there and stuff. I'm like, how is she with other things? He's like, oh, she's a total introvert. And I'm like, what? And what I found that really interesting in this is that she is so passionate about what she's doing and being a costume designer and really wants it so bad. She found a way to make, like, almost become an extrovert when she's in that zone and when she knows like her career depends on it. And it's like she developed this like superpower ability. I don't know how. I want to talk to him more about it because it sounds pretty cool. Because then he was telling me, no, she's really an introvert. Like, she will purposely only use apps to order food because she does not want to have any interaction. Which is like, wait, what? So anyways, there are ways around it. I think it's just about, mindset and approach. But anyways, going back, when it comes to these relationships, when it comes to forming them and everything, it's not so much about the event. It's about you. It's about the way you show up. It's about the way you follow through. You lead with something other than what you can get. Meaning like, going in with self-serving intentions. And I mean, you got to do that to a degree, right? You can't just go in and be like, oh, I just want to help you and do nothing for you and like come off like that, because that's going to be, a bit creeper. But there's got to be a balance, right? You can't just go in with, it's all about me. Because in a lot of this industry and what we do, it can't be. I mean, personally, I don't feel that you're going to get very far if that's the case. And I'm sure most of you agree. It takes teams to do the awesome work that you guys are doing. Even if you are a solo dev, you still have to rely on some other outside help. So in light of this, sometimes when we want to stand out and, want to acquire or want to get something, again, we just look at these things from like a one-sided perspective. And we can't think that way. And honestly, I did that before too. Like I was there before. I was really self-serving. I'm like, hey, I got to get next level up and stuff and try to do what I could do to get out there. But, I realized over time, it's not really how it works. And I've gotten better at not just how I approach that and what things can benefit me, but I also got better at approaching the relationships, what I'm talking about. And when I say relationships, I'm looking at it in a way like, yeah, networking, fine. But I want to go deeper than that. Because honestly, it does go deeper than that. And when it does, more things start to align, more things start to happen. The needle, the impact you're looking to make on others in whatever capacity it may be, for most of you making games for players and stuff. Well, yeah, I think that approach is going to be very valuable and helpful as well too. But it's really about how you're approaching these relationships and what kind of intent. And another way I like to look at this is, doing so with a focus on mutual value. That's, I think, where everything comes into place and starts working out really well. And, there's lots of ways we can interpret our own intent and what mutual value means for us. And, I think we just have to keep an open mind about that. And maybe a quick example here is like, I know most of you are, making games for players and stuff. So what does that mutual value look like? And again, I'm not going to really go into it, but it just organically kind of surfaces like this when I'm thinking about relationships and stuff. That's one of the things my talk kind of focuses on a little bit indirectly is really, if you're serving players better by understanding them more, by knowing how to better communicate with them in a way that no one else really is, you're providing value. And the mutual value to that is you build up this following, you build up this audience that and fans and advocates and stuff over time because they really care for you because they see how much you have paid attention to them and cared for them, how you serve them, right? And if they give you that back, it's in the form of communities, growth, word of mouth, sales, all those other things are byproducts of that type of relationship. But that's just one of many different ways to look at it because even as, a studio, a solo dev, you're going to have relationships with a lot of different other types of people. So, and players isn't just one of them. It's just one of many. But in terms of, when we look at relationships with whoever that may be with, again, it's about that mutual value and seeing like how, first identifying how you can define what that is, and then looking at how you can apply it to others, whether it's related to business goals or even personal goals, like any number of ways that it can start out. Because I'll admit, some of the friends that I have made through, let's say just doing the podcast, from having guests and stuff, some of you reached out to me, and I mean, maybe it's been a few instances, but I would consider you guys friends just because of how you represented yourself. And if you're listening to this now, you know who you are. And for, but still, it's like, it all comes down to these actions and how you carry yourself. So there's lots of different ways. And, I just for sense of clarity, I'm going to provide a couple examples here in terms of what these relationships could look like. And you probably have a lot of them, if not some, already in your life too. And that's great. And I think maybe it's worth dialing in a little bit more and seeing where else you can go from it. So one example I'm going to share is Joe Henson, otherwise known as Indie Game Joe. You may have heard of him. I know Chris Zukowski has featured him on a couple of his articles, at least once, his blog posts and such. And the reason why Joe's such a good example of this is, well, one, it started with him being on the podcast. He has been on the podcast before. Great episode. I apologize. I don't remember what episode number it was. And, from that, we connected over time. I think it started with him saying like, hey, because I got a good sense of you, what you're like on the podcast, I started getting some, I wanted to refer you some projects because I'm kind of busy, right? So it started that way, business related, right? And then from there, I was like, oh, Joe seems pretty cool. I really appreciate that he's actually, referring business to me. Like, he doesn't have to do that. There's any number of people he probably could recommend people going to. So I reached out and just said, hey, I really appreciate you. And like, this means a lot to me and I want you to know that. And thank you, essentially. And then, from there, we kind of, that we were in this cycle, right? He kept referring me again. And I'm like, you know what, I got to reach out again and let's just like have a chat just to say, I don't know, let's catch up. Let's do other things other than just you kind of giving me business all the time. So what we did was we finally connected, and next thing you know, we're having like really, deep, meaningful conversations about stuff. I'm asking him about, what's going on in his life, whether it's like good or bad. I'm just there to listen. And I realized what was happening was there's some things that, like many of us, there wasn't much that he could share with someone different going through some, sometimes some tough times. And just the fact of having someone listen would make all the world of a difference. And what was even nice was some of those things I was like, oh, I could relate and share my stories with him. So then he actually, it really was like, I think, I can't speak from 100%, but it was just something of huge value to him because finally there was someone else that he had, people that he could, go to and talk and other friends and stuff, but this was just a little bit different. And it was still nice to have. And from that, we just now I consider him a very good friend because we have this level not just of trust. I think we well established that earlier on, but so a relationship that we built and made deeper through not just trust, but like having this, I would say, more personal connection. And that's something really, really cool. And as I'm sharing you with this now, I'm like, and even before this, I was like, "Ugh, I need to reach out to him again and have those conversations again." And what's great is I've been finding myself doing that more often with other people. Like, even if it's just talking about shop, because even with Joe, sometimes like we go in tangents and we love just talking shop around what are some cool marketing ideas around horror games. And oh my goodness, we don't stop. It's so much fun. But that's what I'm talking about, is those kind of things that can really deepen things. And yes, this came from like kind of a business related aspect, but then it developed into something more. And what I find in these situations too, it's like, when something comes up and he is busy, who's the first person that he thinks of? And this is not like a strategy of mine, like, oh, let's get to know him really well. So then and when the right time comes, I get more work. Like it's not like that at all. But it works out that way when it is organic, when it is authentic and everything else, right? You don't have to be nefarious about it. I mean, you can if you want to. I don't suggest it though. So that's really cool. So, and another thing I want to share too about relationships because that was more of an example of a direct one, but let's talk about like a indirect one. And in this case, that was another realization I had about relationships too at this event, GDC. And what this is indirect. Because here's the thing, not every connection is going to be direct as it was, as I shared with you about Joe. Sometimes it's just simply the way you carry yourself, like you help others or how you interact with someone. I mean, that can leave a residual effect. And I think knowing this and understanding this is really empowering, but also powerful. So one quick example of this is just simply, us being here, the podcast, right? A lot of what I talk about, as you know, is, marketing business of indie games. But oftentimes I think I've shared on the podcast is, a core focus of this too is that we're talking about different perspectives and really focus, like the theme of the show is about empathy. And I think through the interviews and that kind of that core theme really carries this residual effect. And this is my belief. I don't know. You guys tell me otherwise, I guess. But having these different perspectives, really thinking more about how to be empathetic of others and stuff has this residual effect where it's like there, and not only that, like there's a lot of you I don't know, right? It's just me talking, you listening. So there is that residual indirect impact. And then the residual aspect rather is one where if you have this cool idea from something maybe you learned from the show and this perspective, or maybe it changes your mindset a little bit and you're more positive, maybe that carries into how you present yourself. Maybe that carries into the next conversation you have with someone else. And it starts like becoming contagious or spreads, right? It's like, if you've ever heard of those lines at Starbucks, I think they're dying now because everybody's using the app, but where someone would go to purchase a coffee in the drive-thru and they're like, you know what? I'm feeling nice. Pay for the person's coffee behind me. I've been in those before. And then like one time at a window, someone's like, I'm like, yeah, pay it forward too. And they're like, oh, that's great to hear. You're like the 8th person right now in this row. I'm like, wow, keep it going. Right. But really that kind of like impact and effect really, really has a cool feeling behind it and everything, like when you do it. So it's that residual indirect impact that we have with these relationships that we're forming. And that comes down, it still all comes down to you making these decisions, you deciding whether or not how you want to hold yourself, even if it's on a bad day. It's like, those suck, right? But even in those moments, how do you still carry yourself? Like, how do you look at yourself and be like, man, today sucks. Am I just going to be really pissed off with everybody and let them know it? Or, and sometimes we do that too. I do. I try not to. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, I know it. And so does everybody else. But still, like asking yourself and thinking about it, like, how is that going to carry? What kind of residual impact is that going to have? Not just on me, but on everybody else. Like these types of things, these how you look at relationships this way is really going to influence so many others out there. And a lot of times we don't know it. We have no clue. It's just an idea, but it does matter. Like sometimes, like the Starbucks line, drive-through line, you can actually get something like a tangible results from it, but it doesn't always surface that way. So that's really important too. One other thing in terms of like relationships too is like kind of like how do you like start off strong, right? With someone you never met before. Well, what I just talked about is one way, how you carry yourself and everything else. And this is another good example of kind of this and what I think could form into a stronger relationship. Because again, I don't know. I haven't followed up with this person, and this is someone I did meet at GDC this year. And in this case, what happened was I think I reached out to this individual and asked, "Hey, do you want to meet?" And they said yes. And through using the Meet to Match app, I found out that, this is this person's first GDC. They're coming from the Middle East. I mean, it could very well, I don't recall, but it could very well be their first time in the US, right? So lots of emotions and new things going on and stuff with that. So I was like, hey, look, thinking first time at GDC, why at the very least, why don't I just try to do my part to make this a little bit easier for them? So there's someone on LinkedIn, I forgot his name. It's like Kai Boyd, I think. Seems pretty cool dude. I don't really know him other than that. But he made like some fun tips and advice to, first timers going to GDC. And one was he made a custom Google map showing all the safe areas, restaurants, etc. Right. So I got that link. I was like talking to other people to try to track it down because I forgot that it was him that shared it. And then I got the link and shared it to him. And then I guess if you click on it, it immediately like updates your maps, which is pretty cool. So I'm like, here, this might make finding your way around town a little bit easier. And then one time he's like, we're trying to figure out a meeting destination. And I was like, well, where's your last meeting? And he shared it with me and I knew exactly where it was. I'm like, you know what? How about this? Let me meet you there in the lobby. So that way you don't have to run around and find your way to go around because, just make it easier for you. So he appreciated that. And then when we finally met, we were having a conversation and, it was business as usual with these types of things. He then shared that he's like, as we started kind of like learning more about what I do and what I could provide, he's like, I'll be upfront with you. I am very reserved and don't really trust marketers. And I'm like, oh, okay. How come? And ultimately it came down to him having a bad experience with someone, with an agency. And I was like, okay, I can understand that. That makes sense. And the next thing he said, I thought was really cool. And was, but based on all the help you've given me, which in my mind, I'm like, this is little in what I've maybe could have done. And I wouldn't have probably gone too much more because then it gets maybe borderline obsessive or creeper, right? I don't want that to be the case. He's like, but all the work you've done trying to meet me at my last location, giving me, that stuff. He's like, from you went out of your way to try to make this a better experience for me. So if you are willing to do that for a complete stranger, I can only imagine what it would be like to work with you. And you know what? That really stuck with me because it wasn't so much about thinking about me and what I was doing for this person. It was more of me thinking about, well, one, that's pretty cool when someone says that to you, like, right? I mean, you can't deny that. But the other part is like, I was trying to figure out and ask myself, how did I get to that point? Like, again, it's kind of similar to the what else question. Like, why, but more in particular, why? Like, why was I doing things this way? Well, where did it get me to this point? And we're not going to dive in there a little bit. I did actually, because it really stuck with me, I did meet with my mentor about that and kind of dive in a little bit more with that too, because I thought that was something profound. And when I started to really dial in and think more deeper about why was it that I'm doing that? What is it doing for me by doing that? By, doing more and showing up and presenting myself well to others. Again, all these relationships I'm talking about. What is that helping with? And it's because of I think that and really dialing it and diving into that is why I've been coming along as far as I have, why I keep doing, why I'm always finding new opportunities, why I'm always finding great new relationships with people. Because in this particular example that I'm sharing with you, it wasn't necessarily about pitching anything. And that was actually kind of the beauty of this particular GDC, this event, because I think through this process of learning, this process of developing these relationships and stuff, like honestly, every conversation I had with people, it didn't feel like I was selling anything at all. I just felt like I had an interesting conversation with someone, and part of that conversation was just a potential solution that could solve some of their problems that I could, help them with. And it wasn't, and actually kind of until now, I haven't really thought about it too much, but that was exactly what was happening, where you no longer felt like you were selling to someone. You felt like you were just, wow, having a cool conversation. All right. Yeah. If you need help, let me know, whatever. And that's it. Just like if you were to go to your neighbor and be like, oh, you need help? No, I'm good for now, but I'll let you know. Okay, cool. That's exactly what it felt like. And man, to get to that point, and it doesn't happen overnight. As I shared earlier, I was in different states and figuring things out and learning in time. But to be in that position, man, the stress, it's very nominal. So you can, just stress about everything else, like if you're going to make your flight or not. or anything else that goes on in life. So, in these examples I shared, you might not necessarily relate exactly to those stories, and that's perfectly fine and okay. But I do hope it serves as a good example of the different ways that you can have these types of relationships, how you can go a little bit deeper, and why they actually matter, because it's almost like through this type of connection, indirect or direct or first time impressions, all that stuff, they can really shape kind of your trajectory and where you're going. Because the point I'm really making here is this: every interaction, first or 100th, it's an opportunity. And when you lead with empathy, it can really help align your intent, but also create that opportunity. Horrible, horrible example here. But I got a really nice fry pan that you can season. And one of the things they said about this fry pan is the more you use it, the better it gets. And I'm kind of finding that to be true. So just like this fry pan, going in with this idea that every interaction is an opportunity, and leading with empathy can just make those experiences better and improve them, and everything else is I don't know. They relate, I guess. But I think you get it though. And this applies with everybody, right? It doesn't matter if it's a player, a client, a peer, a friend, a family member, or even someone you may never speak to again in your life. It really does have impact, because leading with the right intent can shape everything for you. I mean, from my own experience, I would say it shaped my entire business and even how I live personally too. Like I'm all about doing as much as I can to lead with empathy. And that helps me understand, what the heck sometimes my wife is thinking about or my kids for that matter. Right. Like if I put myself in my shoes, and why might they be acting this way? Well, basically it opens up for better communication. And it's no different than with anybody else you ever meet. So it's like, hey, putting yourself in your shoes, like that's why it's so important. And the other thing is, it's not about big gestures. Those can go a long way sometimes, but sometimes it's not necessary. Sometimes it's just all about the small moments, right? That are done with care. Like Again, the small little things like I did with that person that was coming over to GDC for the first time. I just gave him a link to a map and said, "Hey, I'll meet you at this place." That's it. That's simple. But man, did that make an impact on him? Because why else would he share something like that? I can only imagine what it would be like working with you. Now, normally when I leave GDC or any big industry event, a lot of times I don't like to have like really specific takeaways or whatever from the thing. My takeaways more so come in the form of themes. I like to wrap everything up in a theme. What was a theme for this year? And I don't mean like, oh, did everybody talk about, NFTs and Web3 and stuff? Like, no, not that kind of theme. Or this year everybody's kidding about AI. No. No, for me this year it wasn't, like I said, about a trend or a tool or even significant changes that need to happen in the industry. It was more of, you know, it's not where you develop the relationships. And it's also not just that relationships matter. My theme was that it's really how you build relationships that makes the difference. Which goes back to what I led in with before by saying GDC was irrelevant. The event itself is not irrelevant. It's still a great event and everything else. And if you can go, I encourage it. But for those of you who can't, because I know it's not as accessible as I would like it to be, and many others feel the same way. But it's not about the event. And that's why it's irrelevant. Because it's really about relationships, how you're building them around you in your local area, how you're building them online, and everything else. And I think when we get to this idea, and again, it's not to say that you shouldn't consider like going to GDC as a goal if it's a challenge for you, because I think that's a great goal to have. There are so many great things that can happen. But you know what? If you make that a goal and you focus on this idea of not just the relationships that matter, but how you build them, it's going to make it so much better. And it's all this realization again that I'm finding out it's shaping how I work, how I help people, and how I live. So yeah, my takeaways this year was I left with a cold and some merch, and a fire to talk about. But I also left with a renewed sense of purpose. Because, events, they can come and go. Conversations can blur together and we can all get kind of lost in the noise and everything. I'm still processing the event, but you know what? I don't need to anymore because I feel like what I really got from it was everything I just shared with you. Because at the end of the day, what really lasts is how you choose to show up for others. Same thing with players. Same thing with partners, people you work with, contractors, anybody, just people, family, friends. That's what lasts. And how you choose to do it. How you choose to engage with them, how you choose to, talk, everything. That could be a single meaningful introduction to someone. Or it's how you, like I said earlier, how you interact with everyone else or that same person over and over again. All those little things matter. And you don't need a conference badge to do that. You just need the intention to build something real. And then follow through to make it matter. Like I did with Joe. He kept throwing me business. Or at least references, referrals, whatever. And then it's like, you know what? I got to thank this guy. And that was just one of many other examples that I do. And because of it, it's like I formed really, really good relationships. Like, because and now these people are friends. They're not just, colleagues. They're not just clients. They're friends.
So that's my takeaway of GDC. That, yes, it was irrelevant. Not in the sense of, look, it's a great event. Highly recommend going. But if you can't go, it's okay, because the real value and how you're going to make that event even better when you get back is really about building not just relationships, but meaningful relationships, and really thinking about how you carry yourself to do that, because it will change everything you do. I feel I can be a testament of that, but I also feel so many others out there would agree with me on the way. And hopefully, you found this helpful, and appreciate you hanging around, because I don't know, I just sometimes like to go off the cuff, share this stuff with you, and maybe it might stick a little. So, and you know what? If this did resonate with you and you have similar takeaways or something, I'd love to hear it. You can, I don't know, write a review if you want. There's places, but I don't know, sometimes you can just rate. So just reach out to me. LinkedIn is going to be the best place for that. Just find me, Andrew Pappas. I think it's under Andrew Pappas Rengen, but I don't know. Just look me up. You'll probably be able to find me, or email it's andrew@rengenmarketing.com. Happy to talk, but LinkedIn's going to be the best place. Connect, send a quick little message, said, hey, I listened to your recent episode and let's talk. I really want to hear how, if this resonated with you, or if you have questions about it, like you're kind of doing this yourself right now on your journey, and you're like, I'm kind of stuck here though. What's a good, let's chat. It's just again, one other way. I'm more than happy. I love talking about this stuff, and I love helping you out with it if you're struggling. So let me know. So once again, thanks for, hanging with me all this time, rambling about stuff and relationships. Don't take this out of context and make people think that I hate GDC. And yeah, you guys are great. Thank you so much. And I guess we'll see you again next week. All right. Take care.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of Indie Game Movement. I'm Andrew Pappas, your host, and the show's producer is Mustafa Price. Show notes for this episode can be found by visiting rengenmarketing.com, the number episode of the show. Rengen Marketing is a consulting marketing company that helps indie devs with their marketing efforts. Whether you need guidance with your game's marketing strategy or could use a free marketing plan template, then please visit www.rengenmarketing.com and take action. A special thanks to Dakota Saw for Season 2's opening theme and Melissa Gellis for the new logo design. And as always, thanks for being such great listeners, and we'll see you next time on Indie Game Movement.